Hello friends, this is Music Man from his man cave, and just in the last few days I've run into people that are talking about, one person said how bad things were in the past compared to how good they are today, and another person says that the world's going to hell in a handbasket. And then there's the next person, doom, despair, and agony on me. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about, is today really worse than any other time in history, or has just the news got to the point where it is nothing but a propaganda device to make you think that everything is bad? Everything's bad. I actually heard a lady this week, say to me, I don't think I want to have any children in this day and age. Really? Well, let's analyze this, shall we? Music Man from his man cave. So the question is, are things worse today? Let's just talk about American history. Just in my lifetime. Things that have influenced my life. And you tell me if you think that things are better, worse, or about the same throughout history. In just the time that I've been alive and what's been going on. Now when you're a child and you're born, you see the world from a very protective experience. And everything's magic and everything's new. I remember the first time I saw Star Wars in 1977, and I was a child. It blew me away, especially since I was overseas in Honduras at that time. So it had a real impact on me, a bigger impact than it does today. Today people take sci-fi like that for granted. I mean, to be fair, if a movie like Jupiter Ascending or the new Terminator that just came out back in 1977, people would be walking out of the theaters talking about what an absolute masterpiece it was and how incredible the special effects were. But today, because people are so spoiled and they've seen such progress in special effects, people are just kind of like, so what? So let's just think about this for a minute. So today's better or worse than any time in history? Well, we all know some great things happened in the 1960s, right? But if you're going to say that things are worse today, and you're going to say things are awful today, do you remember that our president was assassinated? Oliver Stone even made a movie about it called JFK. And then his brother was killed very soon after that. There was someone in some high office. And so do we also remember that they were bringing nukes to Cuba? It was called the Bay of Pigs. And there's a movie called 13 Days, and we thought we were on the verge of World War III because we're about to start a nuclear war. Nuclear war. Does anyone remember that? And then we can't forget in the 1960s Vietnam. I mean, literally we went over and we fought a war that we were basically protecting a border and got a bunch of our young men killed to basically, they were fighting behind their hands behind their back. They were winning the battles, but we couldn't win this war because it was unwinnable. And why are we doing that? Because we were policing the world. That's why. And so, comparing that today, this year's a good year, as far as I'm concerned. It means, yes, some bad things have happened, but on that magnitude? Okay, well, let's go to the 1970s. 1970s, oh, what happened in the 1970s? Did anything happen at all? You guys got to remember Jimmy Carter. And you got to remember the hostage crisis. You guys have to remember hyperinflation and mortgage interest rates were 14%. You have to remember that. I mean, we couldn't even think about, my family couldn't even think about buying a house in that time. It was a terrible time. Awful time. Remember cars? Ugh. They sounded like gravel was in the motor. And at 100,000 miles they were shot. Remember setting points? Remember setting the carburetor a little bit rich, because if you set it too thin, it would destroy the pistons. Remember that? Today we have fuel injection, which is very clean and very efficient, and either it works or it don't. And not that expensive to replace. About the same as it used to be for a carburetor. Let's move on. So in the 1970s, I remember the Panama Canal incident? Does anyone remember any of these things? People are saying today is so much worse. Look what's happened in Ferguson. Look what's happening in Baltimore. Look what's going on with our country. Hysteria. Even today. Are they talking about the women's soccer team that won the championship? No. They said, are they going to get paid less than men? Who is this, Debbie Downer? Okay, well, let's talk about the 80s. Well, the 80s, I remember during Reaganomics and all that, I remember Reaganomics, the trickle-down theory, right? Trickle-down, Reaganomics. I remember them trying to cut our music program in my school, and me in 1985, studying before a school board and the city that I lived in, and saying music is important. I think that it's valuable, and I think that it gives kids a well-rounded education. I remember that, and that was not during the time of a Democratic reign. That was the time of a Republican reign. And does anyone remember the crash in 1989 of the real estate market? Does anyone remember when they tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan and shot one of his protectors? Anybody remember this? Any of this ringing a clue? Pretty bad times. Pretty awful. Pretty horrible for the doom, despair, and agony on me people. I mean, that. Do you remember the ozone, the hole in the ozone that by now was supposed to burn the planet up? And now it's mending itself, which is also now endangering the planet again. So is the hole dangerous getting bigger, or is it danger mending? I'm confused. Seems like that's just how it is. If it's getting smaller, it's bad. If it's getting larger, it's bad. Okay, in the 1990s, what happened then? Oh yeah, we impeached a president. Yeah, we did. We impeached a president. Things were going pretty good. In 1989, that real estate market, we recovered pretty nicely. We had a surplus in the budget, but we had a president that was impeached. And that's what is going to be remembered, I think, of the 90s. You got to remember in 1999, Y2K. If the computers shut down, we won't have water and we won't have electricity until they get the computers figured out for months, because we don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to reset? Or what's going to happen with the computers? It was called Y2K. Some of you don't remember that. You're going, what are you talking about? It really did happen. My wife and I were stirring up big jugs of water in our basement and ramen noodles, and people were stirring up wheat and buying generators, and I am not kidding you. They were talking like it was the end of the world. Absolutely, it did happen. And then 2000s. Right away, George W. Bush gets introduced to terrorists who killed 3,000 innocent Americans, 9/11 of 2001. I remember where I was when that happened. It was not a good time. It was a horrible time for America. And for a brief moment, America turned back to God, and they were angry at me because kids didn't know God Bless America, when the year before I was forbidden to even do any music that had angels in it in school. See how things can change? So, are things really that bad? Are things just horrible? You know, I would say things are about the same. Do your history. Things are about the same. I think there was ages that were worse, but in America, our democracy works. Capitalism and free enterprise work. And sometimes people get stuck in this doom, despair, and everything's going down, and we're all gonna not see tomorrow and so forth. But that's not true. One other thing I'll mention, and I could go on talking about this for a long time, but do some research, and you'll see that even 2010 to now we had that, or 2008 to now we had the real estate crash, and we had the bailout, and now we have trillions of dollars of debt, right? Trillions of dollars of debt? Insurmountable debt, correct? I don't think so. I think if we stopped policing the world and brought some of our money back to our country, that we could pay that off pretty quickly, in my opinion. That's my opinion. So are things really so bad? Are things so much better than they've been in the past? Some ways. I love the technology. TV sets are amazing, and they're cheap. The colors they put out, vehicles with the fuel injection and the standards of engineering that they use now, it marvels the mind. So I say don't buy into all the hype. I say be careful watching the news. I don't think the news has very much good to say, personally. They're not telling news anymore. Even their tone of voice is like, you should be really, really stunned and shocked and outraged by this. Sorry, no sell. Talk to you later. Bye.